There's a particular kind of frustration that arrives in the middle of summer. You planted in spring with so much hope, and now, just when your table should be overflowing, you're looking at a garden that has slowed to almost nothing. The lettuce bolted weeks ago. The early radishes are a distant memory. Even some of the beans have started to wind down, and the long, hot months still stretch ahead with very little left to show for it. An Amish gardener would recognize that feeling, and then quietly point you toward a different way of thinking about a summer garden altogether. The crops we are going to walk through today are not the ones that sprint hard and then disappear. These are the ones that produce steadily, week after week, from the height of summer all the way to the edge of frost. Some of them you already know, but two of them might genuinely surprise you. One shows up in the middle of this list and has been growing in Amish kitchen gardens for longer than most gardening books have been written. The other, at the very end, is something most gardeners have never even thought to put in the ground. And once you hear about it, you will wonder why you waited. Both are worth staying for. Let's start with the one that earns its place on every Amish fence line. The first crop on this list is the pole bean, and if you have ever watched an Amish family work a garden fence line in July, you would notice something that looks almost like quiet ceremony. Every few days, someone walks the row with a basket in hand, picking beans. Not frantically, not all at once, just steadily and calmly, the way someone does a task they have done their whole life, because they know what the plant needs from them in return for what it gives. The central rule of pole beans as a continuous producer is this: the more you pick, the more they grow. Leave pods to mature on the vine, and the plant reads that as its purpose being complete. It slows down. It begins to close up shop, but stay on top of it. Pick young, pick often, and a healthy pole bean vine will keep producing for 10, 12, sometimes 14 weeks without stopping. An Amish family planting a long row of pole beans along a fence is not just feeding the household this week. They are planning for fresh beans through July, dried beans through August, and saved seed beans for next year, all from the same planting. The variety matters less than the method. Whatever pole bean grows well where you are, treat it as if it owes you a harvest every 4 days, and it will. A bean left unpicked is a bean plant that has decided it is finished. The second crop is one that experienced kitchen gardeners have quietly relied on for generations, and it follows a rule worth holding on to. A plant you can harvest without killing is worth more than one you cannot. Swiss chard lives entirely by that principle. Cut the outer leaves down near the base, and the plant simply reaches upward and pushes out new growth from the center. Do this once a week through the summer, and a single chard plant can fill a soup pot or a salad bowl more times than most gardeners would think to count. It does not bolt in heat the way lettuce does. It does not sulk in dry weather the way regular spinach might. It simply continues, season long, asking very little of the gardener in return. In an Amish kitchen garden, chard often runs in a long row alongside other greens. It's used as a workhorse crop through the months when tender lettuces cannot survive the heat. The leaves go into everything, cooked down like spinach, added to stews, stirred into eggs on a late summer morning. One detail that most gardeners overlook is that chard planted in early summer and harvested consistently will still be producing in early fall, long after much of the rest of the garden has given up. That kind of quiet longevity is exactly what an Amish gardener plans for. When a plant asks very little and gives a great deal in return, it belongs in your garden. The third plant is one that nearly everyone who gardens has grown, but far fewer people have grown well. Summer squash is famous for its abundance, but knowing a thing and understanding it are two different matters. An Amish gardener does not simply plant summer squash and stand back. They manage it carefully so it keeps producing rather than burning out before midsummer. The key insight is this: squash must be harvested small, not only because small squash taste better, though they do, but because a squash left to grow large on the vine sends a signal to the plant that its purpose has been accomplished. Production slows, the energy goes elsewhere. A zucchini the size of your forearm is not a bonus. It is a message from the plant that it thinks it is finished. Harvest at 6 to 8 inches. Walk the plants every second day. And pull any hiding squash you have missed before they grow enormous. Those oversized ones are a quiet drain on everything the plant could be putting into new fruit. An Amish family with 3 or 4 well-managed summer squash plants will eat squash every week from early summer through September and still find more to share with neighbors. That is not luck. That is consistent, attentive harvesting. The plant is always deciding whether it is done. Your job is to keep convincing it that it isn't. Take a moment here. Think about the crops on this list so far, and think about whether one of them could step into an empty space in your own garden this summer. What has your growing season been missing? Coming in at number 4 is one that surprises gardeners who have not tried it, but earns a permanent place in any summer garden once they do. Okra is among the most relentlessly productive plants a summer garden can hold, and in the Amish communities where it is grown, it is treated not as a specialty crop but as a dependable summer staple. Once established in warm soil and full sun, it grows aggressively upward, sometimes reaching 5 or 6 feet, and produces pods in a rhythm that rewards daily attention. Like beans and squash, okra must be harvested before it matures. The window is small. Pods are best at 2 to 4 inches, and if left on the plant past that point, they go woody and tough within just a couple of days. But harvested at the right moment, consistently, an okra plant will produce through the entire summer without pausing. What most gardeners do not realize is how extraordinarily drought-tolerant okra becomes once it is established. It was grown in hot, dry conditions long before irrigation was common, and it handles the hardest weeks of summer heat better than almost anything else in the garden. It does not complain. It does not wilt and wait to be rescued. It simply keeps growing. A plant that thrives in the hardest months of summer is a plant worth learning. Now here's the 5th crop, and this is one that most gardeners have never encountered, though an Amish kitchen garden in the peak of summer often has it climbing a fence or a trellis in quiet, steady abundance. Malabar spinach is not true spinach. It is a vining plant with thick, glossy, deep green leaves that thrives in precisely the conditions regular spinach cannot survive: high heat, high humidity, and long, bright summer days, where ordinary spinach bolts and turns bitter. In July, Malabar spinach is just beginning to hit its stride. The leaves have a mild, slightly earthy flavor, and they have a gentle mucilaginous quality when cooked that makes them excellent for thickening soups and stews in late summer. Raw, they hold their texture well. And because this plant climbs rather than spreading outward, while it uses very little horizontal garden space, a significant advantage when summer beds are already full. Planted once the soil has warmed thoroughly and given something to climb, Malabar spinach produces tender shoot tips and leaves continuously through the hottest part of the season. The more you harvest the growing tips, the more branching the plant produces, and the more it gives back in return. Most gardeners give up on leafy greens when heat arrives. An Amish gardener keeps a trellis of Malabar spinach producing green leaves through the months when everyone else has abandoned that category of harvest entirely. Do not let midsummer become a season without something green growing. The sixth crop on this list is the indeterminate cherry tomato. And there is one distinction worth understanding before anything else. There is a real difference between a tomato plant that produces one heavy harvest and one that produces steadily across 3 or 4 months. That difference is the word indeterminate, and it is the only kind of tomato an Amish family with a large kitchen garden would choose if their goal is continuous summer production. An indeterminate tomato does not stop growing when it sets fruit. It keeps growing, keeps flowering, keeps setting new clusters until cold weather finally closes the season. A determinate variety ripens everything at once. Useful if you're putting up a canning batch in a single long day, but not what you want if your goal is fresh tomatoes on the table every week from July to October. So cherry tomato varieties within the indeterminate category are especially generous because each truss carries far more fruit than a larger tomato, sometimes 20 or 30 small fruits per cluster, and new trusses continue forming throughout the entire season. The Amish practice of staking and training tomatoes carefully, removing suckers on the lower portion of the plant, and maintaining good airflow through the foliage is not tidiness for its own sake. It is disease prevention. It keeps the plant spending its energy on fruit production rather than a tangle of leaves. A single, well-trained, indeterminate cherry tomato plant, given a tall enough stake and consistent weekly attention, can outlast nearly every other summer crop in the garden. The tomato that keeps reaching is the one worth growing. Here is something worth doing in your garden this week. Something an Amish gardener does almost without thinking. Walk your beds with a small basket every morning, not to harvest everything, but simply to look closely. Pick anything that is ready. Remove anything that has gone past its prime. Notice what is lagging and what is thriving. This daily walk takes no more than 10 minutes, but it keeps every continuous producing plant on this list from stalling. The act of harvesting regularly is not just collection, it is instruction. You're telling your plants, in the only language they understand, that their work is not yet finished. And now, the seventh crop, the last one on this list, and the one that most gardening books mention briefly before moving past it, but that an Amish gardener who has grown it once rarely gives up. New Zealand spinach is not related to regular spinach, and it shares almost nothing with it except the use of its leaves. What it does offer is a remarkable tolerance for heat and dry soil that makes it one of the most reliable summer leafy greens available to any gardener who knows to look for it. It grows low and wide, forming a thick ground level mat of triangular, slightly succulent leaves with a mild and pleasant flavor. The growing tips of each stem are harvested just the newest few inches, and the plant branches repeatedly in response, producing new harvest points continuously through the entire summer. There is no special technique required, no particular attention beyond regular picking. A planting of New Zealand spinach, once established, practically tends itself. It does not need rich soil. It handles drought with patience and without complaint. It keeps producing leafy greens through weeks of heat that have shut down everything else in that category. What is easy to miss about this plant is that it was grown in kitchen gardens for centuries before modern seed catalogs made so many other options available. It did not disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because, over time, people simply forgot to keep looking for it. Sometimes the oldest answer is still the right one. A garden that never stops producing is not an accident. It is the result of small, deliberate choices made before summer even arrives. The right plants in the right places, chosen not for spectacle, but for staying power. An Amish gardener does not measure the success of a growing season by the single biggest harvest day. They measure it by how many days the table had something fresh on it from the garden. That quiet, steady abundance is what every crop on this list was chosen for. Not drama, not record harvest, just something worth eating week after week through every long summer month. Gardening is a slow conversation between you and the ground beneath your feet. The seasons that feel most satisfying are almost never the ones with a single dramatic moment. They are the ones where, looking back in late September, you realize you ate well from your own ground almost every day, from late spring right to the edge of the first frost. If one of these crops caught your attention today, I would be glad to hear which one down in the comments. Sometimes reading what others are planning to try is its own quiet kind of encouragement. Thanks for spending some time in the garden with me today. I'll see you in the next one.